Rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa. We acknowledge that there is a strength beyond ourselves when we work together to serve others. May we put aside our own personal interests, work with integrity and openness, striving to create a community that supports its people and the environment. Let us, in a moment of quiet, focus on why we are here. We give thanks for the wisdom of the past, look for opportunities in the present, and accept the challenges of the future. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa, kia pai te harere. Thank you, everyone. Welcome all to our extraordinary council meeting. We have a rather full agenda. The fruits of our labour over many, many months now, coming to us formally for the first time. Firstly, we have apologies from Councillor Crystal and Councillor Wright. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Bogue and Councillor Crown. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Are there any conflicts of interest? We do not have any presentations in the public forum. There are no announcements from myself. Any announcements from management? Excellent. We'll get straight into the agenda items. Our first agenda item today is the Hawke's Bay Region Three Waters report. And this agenda item is the presentation of the Morrison Lowe report, Hawke's Bay Three Waters business case of Three Waters service delivery options. And we are being asked to receive the report and note that we have signed up to working with the government on the Three Waters reform process. And the reporting officer is noted as Keith Marshall, Interim Chief Executive. Did you wish to speak to this at all?
Not really. I think we've canvassed this at length over an extended period of time, so happy to take questions if that's required.
Okay, open the floor to questions.
I just wondered, through you, Madam Mayor, if you could perhaps give a very brief summary of what this is about for people who are watching and are not aware of exactly what this is about.
So some time ago, the councils across the Hawke's Bay combined to work together to have a look at assessment of the options across the Three Waters array. That work was carried out over an extended period of time. We've gone through in some depth. The attached report is in the agenda. Quite an extensive analysis of all of the various options and possibilities. It has arrived at a point in which the government have decided to progress with so jointly funded report by the Crown. The government has decided to progress with the Three Waters reforms. Subsequent to the report being finished, we've entered a memorandum of understanding with the government in respect to progressing those reforms, and we're currently looking at progressing funding agreements and arrangements for the program. So that's where it sits at the moment. The report itself will be incredibly helpful, not only to us, but to all councils across the region in terms of being able to advise us and government in respect to the reforms and the progress of the reforms as they take place.
Are there any further questions? No? Okay. Do I have a mover and seconder for, thank you, Councillor Simpson and Councillor Brown. Did you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Simpson?
Through you, Madam Chair, only to agree with what the Chairman has said, the CEO has said. It's a comprehensive report. It gives us a good basis for our progressing the Three Waters space going forward. It also gives us a good set of information with regards to our negotiations with government around the new reforms, and I think it is a worthy piece of document to be received.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, no? Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? No? Okay, I'll therefore put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving on to our second agenda item, which is related. So the Three Waters Reform Program funding agreement, delivery plan and proposed projects. And the reporting officers are Adele Henderson and John Kingsford. So I invite you to speak to the agenda item, whoever's taking the lead on this.
Thank you. Jimi Hendrix is showing us flavour here. Sorry about that feedback. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I obviously was a bit slow on the draw to hand out, and so you've got me talking to the report. Carrying on from the previous report that talked about Hawke's Bay's own regional Three Waters review, this speaks to the government's Three Waters reform program of work. Previous reports to council saw council sign up to an MOU to work collaboratively with our partners in the Three Waters space to inform the government Three Waters reform program of work, and that MOU required us to develop a funding agreement and a delivery plan identifying the projects that we will be allocating our share of the region's funding to. So there's a bit of background there that encapsulates that commentary. There's a bit of an update there from the Three Waters Committee, and then we move into the reform program and funding package. Very sensitive mouse here. So we've identified some prioritised projects that we're proposing to fund through the reform funding. It is more than what funding is available, but that gives us flexibility should some of these initiatives prove to happen slower or hit roadblocks. But as you can see there, we've got sort of priority 1 and priority 2 and 3 programs of work. And rather than go through and identify or speak to each project, it's probably worth taking questions on any of those. And there is still some work to do in this as I think you have a draft in front of you now of our delivery plan. So there's still some work to do with this and some ratification from DIA on exactly the detail that they're seeking in that as we move forward developing this. There's also some workshopping to do regionally around the regional projects line item. Some of those individual projects will be considered as regional initiatives as well. So rather than speak to every project, perhaps we take some questions on those.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions. Councillor Taylor.
Mine isn't directly in relation to the projects, but in the handout that we've received and in previous information, additional staff will be on fixed-term contracts. I can understand the rationale for that. But you also note that engineers are in short supply, so the risk that the work that we are hoping to achieve through this funding of not being able to be completed, and do we have any particular contingency of recruitment so that we can get the expertise that we require? Is there a significant risk that we can't do the work? Or do we have any contingency for outside finding the appropriate staff?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's a very good point, and it's definitely worthy of some conversation here. I think you're correct. I agree with you in terms of that as a risk. And so while our preference is to have fixed-term employees internal to the organisation, and we have already started talking with a recruitment agent to help us find those resources that we've identified. And part of our regional conversation to be had soon will look at is there some collaboration that might add value to that recruitment process. The backstop, I guess, is to engage consultants to do some of that work. So we'll need to consider at what point we take the consultant path as opposed to an internal resource path. Recognising that the consultant's still required to be informed and provided with information and managed. So definitely a risk, and I think we need to be open and transparent about that risk and how it may impact on the ability to spend the money in that time frame.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Oh,
it's got a thing now, so hopefully it doesn't.
Oh, that one's no better.
Testing. Did that answer your question there, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we're at least thinking about it, because it's obviously a risk when this money is being distributed around the country. We're only one small part of that, so we're all going to be competing for the same resources, so we need to at least have some thought of how we may, and I think the regional approach is worthy of consideration.
Any further questions? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'm just interested in the negotiation process. We're looking at signing off delegation to the CEO, and I note that it says that if enough projects are on the list are rejected and we have to find other projects, that we're delegating the responsibility of finding those projects to the CE. And I just wondered, is that likely to be a face-to-face discussion where he's going to need to do that on the fly, or is there an opportunity for us to be informed before that information gets put back to the government?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have a list here that well exceeds the amount of money that we have available. So it's highly unlikely that we wouldn't be able to do a substitution off the program. And if that was the case, we would come back around council for a further discussion if we need to.
Thank you.
Councillor Bogue?
Right, just through you, Madam Mayor. I understand that the projects that we have proposed are projects that are not already in our LTP. They're over and above, but essential. With the document that we've just been given, I see that's the agreement with the Department of Internal Affairs, which builds on what's in our agenda and clarifies and expands on it, I think. Is that the case? I just wondered, is this going to be public knowledge as well? I'm really pleased that all this is out in the open, that we're laying out publicly what we're hoping to, what money we're applying for and for what purposes. But I just wondered if this document that we just received, if that also is going to be publicly available.
So tabled in a public meeting, so it is automatically public document, and we're still working on that as a draft yet, so that's still got a little way to go, but the answer is yes. And I think the Department of Internal Affairs have been quite clear about the process being an open one.
So further to that, it will be double debated once we finalise the program, so it will come back in a more, particularly with regard to this document, in a more formal setting and report.
Any further questions? Councillor Crown?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Given the risk that Councillor Taylor has just raised, I see that our reporting schedule calls for quarterly reports. I was wondering, will we be receiving those through a standing committee or to our full council meeting in order to, I guess, mitigate and be aware of what we are actually able to complete within each quarter?
Certainly that's our intention, and we will be aiming to line up those quarterly reporting with our own council cycles as well as through to the Department of Internal.
Right, if there's no further questions, I will read out the officer's recommendation for any viewers we may have their information. So Part A is to approve entering into the funding agreement and delivery plan for the first stage of the Three Waters Services Reform Program by the 30th of September. B, approve the proposed projects to be undertaken as part of the delivery plan, noting that these are subject to approval from the Department of Internal Affairs. C, provide delegation to the Chief Executive to make required changes to the delivery plan in order to finalise the agreement with DIA, noting that Council have been provided with projects that are in excess of the 12.51 million available funding, and projects will be prioritised from those identified under Priority 2 and 3 list provided in this report. D, note the reform program as part of the government's program to reform current water service delivery into larger scale providers to realise significant economic, public health, environmental and other benefits over the medium to long term, and that signing the Memorandum of Understanding, funding agreement and delivery plan does not create any obligation upon Council with regard to future steps of this reform program. And E, delegate signing of the funding agreement and delivery plan to the Chief Executive and Mayor. Do I have a mover and seconder? Absolutely. That's correct, and this will come back to our next full council meeting for the second debate.
Happy to move.
Happy to move. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded by Councillor Tapani. Thank you. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Brown?
I think this is an ideal opportunity for us to get on top of some projects that have sat on sort of the bottom of our to-do list for quite some time. It gives us, the projects we're putting forward are a prioritised list of important work that's maybe been overshadowed by urgent work in the last few years. And it also gives us an opportunity to continue to strengthen our regional relationships through the money put aside for regional projects. So very happy with the list and the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Tapani? Anyone else wish to speak to the motion before us? No? I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving on to agenda item 3, budgets to be carried forward to 2020-21. And I would call on Caroline Thompson to speak to the paper, please.
Through the Mayor, this paper is seeking approval to carry forward a total of 41.3 million of unspent capital and OPEX from 1920 into 2021 or future years depending on program timing. It should be noted that 21 million or almost half of the total requested is made up of CapEx carry forwards for the pool of 13 million, 5 million for the Enfield Reservoir project and an operating carry forward of 4 million for the PGA Courts grant. Many of the carry forward requests relate to projects that were already underway at the year end, and the budget is required to be carried forward to complete these projects in 2021. Once the carry forwards have been approved, officers will determine the program timing in conjunction with the refresh of the capital plan as part of the long-term plan process. Detail of the carry forward requests is contained in the attachment, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Caroline. One question from me, which might be better aimed at some of the other directors here, is we have made a conscious effort for the current annual plan to revise our capital program to ensure that we're not setting unrealistic expectations on delivery of our CapEx. And noting that there is a significant amount, obviously, of carry forwards here, are we confident that that's not going to place undue pressure on us on top of our 2020-21 existing capital plan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's probably a question for me. I think we need to reflect on the environment in which we've considered our capital program for this financial year, particularly with regard to the impacts of COVID on our processes. If we all might recall, we had to revisit our annual plan process and basically do it all again. And so the time that we may have ordinarily have focused our time on looking at our carryovers and rationalising that had to be invested into our annual plan. So no, this is not an ideal process, and I think the carryovers are pretty significant. However, the time available to really rationalise that down and look very hard at that just simply wasn't available. And so I think, to be honest, we won't deliver all of these carryovers. But it was also recognised that we're coming into a long-term plan where we wash all that up again. So those projects where the carryovers apply to already committed programs of work we will look to spend that, but we'll have to be, I guess, have another look at our program of work and how the priorities fit in terms of the carryovers versus the capital programs that we've already agreed to. So absolutely agree, not ideal, largely circumstantial, I'd like to think. Wouldn't like to carry on this practice, and certainly it hasn't been in the last couple of years.
Thank you. And yes, definitely acknowledging that we have had those additional challenges to deal with. So we're not quite probably as in a position we would otherwise like to be. Opening the floor to questions from others. No. Councillor Brown.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Just something, picking up on something you said there, that some of the projects have already started and therefore have to be continued/finished in this financial year. Are there any projects that haven't started that we could actually just take off the books? Is that a thing?
Yes, and that was part of the process that the management went through when they were determining what was required to be carried forward. So yes, there are some projects that haven't been started yet, but they are programmed to be completed in 2021.
Okay.
Through the Mayor, just to add further to that comment, so the example we've got in there, which is a large cost, is around the pool. So rather than taking it out of the plan, we can hold it in the plan and then it will be reviewed again as part of the long-term plan. So by actually taking something else, you won't have the ability to go back to it, but by actually holding it and putting it into a future year, it can be reconsidered by Council.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, I read out the officer's recommendation. A, that council approve total capital carry forward budgeted expenditure of $36,002,409 from 2019-20 into the 2020-21 or future years depending on the timing of the program. And B, approve total operational expenditure carry forward budgeted expenditure of $5,347,371 from 2019-2020 into 2020-21. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Simpson. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Taylor?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory and it's a process that we've used in the past.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson?
No, I look forward to the LTB discussions. We will prioritise some of this work to ensure that it meets our capacity to deliver.
I agree. Open the floor to anyone else who would like to speak to the recommendation before us. No.
May I ask a question, just through you, Madam Mayor? The 36 million, how does that compare with previous years? Is this quite, I can't remember, but is this quite normal or different or more or less than, say, this time last year? If anybody knows?
Through the Mayor, this is significantly more than previous years, but bearing in mind that 13 million of it does relate to one particular item. I think from memory last year it was in the order of 15 million, around about, that we carried forward, but prior to that it's been much lower.
Thank you. Councillor Tapani, another
Yes, please.
question? Yeah.
Comment?
Yes, yep, great.
The comment was with regards to matters that are in the background, and that is that the $36 million and the extensive amount of work that our staff and this council have gone through since COVID particularly, for me represents quite a large chunk of money that's not circulating in our economies. So I'm looking forward to, one, as Councillor Simpson puts it, making sure that we stay within our capacity ability, but also I'm hoping for constant reminders from our staff that that might put a bit of pressure on us in the next 12 months coming forward. So looking forward to working with our staff on how we can get those funds circulating in our economies.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Our next agenda item is the draft revenue and financing policy and underlying information. So I guess I would just like to make an opening comment that this is what I was referring to at the opening of the meeting. This has been a tremendous amount of work for staff and elected members alike, and I would like to acknowledge all the time that has been spent on getting to the point we are now where we have the draft policy in front of us, and I welcome Gary up to talk to the paper alongside Caroline. Thank you.
Actually, sorry, it's Caroline's going to talk to this one.
Through the Mayor, the purpose of this paper is to recommend amendments to the revenue and financing policy for adoption and subsequent consultation with the community. The revenue and financing policy sets out council's various sources of funding and the tools that we use to collect revenue to pay for the capital and operational expenditure. The mechanics of how this is applied are contained in the rates policy and the funding impact statement. As you know, Council has undertaken a first principles approach to reviewing the revenue and financing policy through a series of workshops. I think we had in the order of 10 workshops over the last 12 months on this review. The review was split into 2 stages and followed the steps set out under Section 101(3) of the Local Government Act. The process undertaken is set out in 4.2 of the report, and it involved Council assessing and agreeing the preferred funding tools and, for operational and capital expenditure for each activity, and considered the overall impact on the social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being of the community. The main change to the revenue and financing policy relates to the rating differentials for general rates, and it is proposed that 3 new differential categories will replace the existing 6 to ensure equality and fairness for all ratepayers. These changes will impact on specific groups of residents, and it is proposed that targeted consultation with those affected parties is undertaken. This will be outlined in the statement of proposal to be presented to Council on 8th of October. The policy has been legally reviewed by Simpson Grierson and will be updated following consultation and feedback from the community, and will take effect from 1st of July 2021. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Caroline. I'll open up for questions from the floor. Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, when was the last time this policy was reviewed?
Yes, it's
2001.
2001.
well,
yeah.
it is reviewed every 3 years,
Yeah.
but to this extent, it has been several decades.
Thank you. Well overdue.
Any further questions? I'll read out the officer's recommendation. A, that Council adopt the draft revenue and financing policy as attached in Appendix A, and B, note that the rating implications from the revenue and financing policy review will be reflected in the statement of proposal and consultation document to be presented to Council on 8th of October 2020. I'm happy to move the motion from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I guess, again, I just want to acknowledge that, as Caroline said, this was a series of approximately 10 workshops, many hours. One would potentially call dry subject that wasn't necessarily bundles of fun. But as Councillor McGrath stated, we were well overdue to do a full and comprehensive review of this policy, and I am looking forward to going out to the community to consult on this, which will commence approximately mid-October, and receive feedback on where we've arrived at. So definitely a long time in the making getting to this point, and looking forward to moving through the next stages. Councillor Taylor, did you wish to speak to this at all?
I concur with your first comments and agree, long time overdue and a lot of work. The only further comment I'd like to make is that I think that for our first term councillors, it was an extremely enlightening process for councillors to understand how the council funds its activities, because as a third term councillor, it's the only time in 3 terms that we have actually reviewed this, and it does give you a much greater in-depth understanding of how the council funds its activities. So I think for the councillors in their first term, it's put you in a tremendous position to know what happens going forward. So congratulations to the staff, because I think it was although it was long and onerous, it's been very valuable.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to echo Councillor Taylor's comments. As a first-term councillor, I particularly enjoyed it. I didn't find it dry at all, as you all know. And I really enjoyed the logic or the step-by-step process that we went through, and really enjoyed the discussions that we had around the table and the empathy and the logic that went into deciding all of the figures that go into this table. So a lot of work, but I think we made some really important decisions that our community will be proud of if they ever go into the detail. So.
Thank you. We've had 3 speak in support. Did anyone wish to speak against the motion? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So moving on to the second part of this suite of papers before us, being the draft rating policy. And this time I invite Gary to speak to the agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just first off, to put in a little bit of context, the revenue and financing policy is it's a foundational piece of work, and it impacts a number of other parts of what we do with regards to rating and everything else, which is why I'll be presenting these next few papers, just to try and bring it all into line. So in this report, we're seeking council approval to reintroduce a rating policy and allow officers to consult on the policy. The detailed rating information is currently found in the funding impact statement included in annual plans and long-term plans. There's no legal requirement to maintain a rating policy, which is why the council hasn't bothered with one for maybe 7 years. However, as part of the revenue and financing policy review, it was identified that a number of changes were being proposed that would impact on rates. Without proposing changes to the funding impact statement, we would be unable to properly disclose those proposed amendments to the public. So in terms of process, we'd potentially need to consult on the funding impact statement now, calculate the rates for the 2021, then do further consultation and set the rates again for the long-term plan next year. It's an unworkable situation. So a rating policy solves that problem by being the bridge between the revenue and financing policy and the funding impact statement. Any changes made to the rating policy would flow through to the funding impact statement next year. This initial rating policy is based on our current funding impact statement with several proposed amendments. So we've got a new general rate differentials and associated rates, a new stormwater rate. Now this is currently funded through general rates. We've got an increase in the unconnected rate for city water and sewerage from 50% to 70%. And we're also noting that a wastewater rate is being considered to replace the sewerage rate within the policy. So it's effectively a bookmark. These proposed amendments are intended to build on changes proposed in the revenue and financing policy and reinforce council strategy. So should council approve the policy, the next step will be developing a proposal as part of the wider revenue and financing policy review.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions. I think we've canvassed these well in our workshops, so I'm not surprised that we don't have a lot of questions coming through. I will read through the officer's recommendation that Council A, approve the reintroduction of a rating policy. B, approve the proposed general rate differentials and rates applied. C, approve an increase in the city water rate from 50% to 70% for rating units that are not connected but within 100 metres of the system. D, approve an increase in the sewerage rate from 50% to 70% for rating units that are not connected but within 30 metres of the system. E, approve a note that a wastewater rate is being proposed to replace the sewerage rate. F, approve the introduction of a stormwater rate. G, note proposed amendments to rating differentials and definitions within the draft revenue and financing policy. H, note proposed amendments to remissions within the draft rates remission policy.
I, note proposed amendments to postponements within the draft rates postponement policy, and J, approve council officers consulting on the rating policy in conjunction with the revenue and financing policy. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Crown and Councillor Bogue. Councillor Crown, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really, I just want to compliment our staff. As Gary has pointed out, this is using a tool that we haven't used for a number of years, reintroducing it in order to make our situation workable. And I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say we've been incredibly thankful to our staff throughout this whole entire process, leading us through what has been a mammoth amount of work. But also their knowledge and understanding of the tools that we have available has helped to make the job much easier. So thank you very much.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this resolution as well, and I agree with everything that Councillor Crown said. But just like with the revenue and financing policy, what was really special for me was when we went through the process of understanding the different levers and aspects of this policy. I felt it was really interactive in that we were able to go through a process and feel that, you know, I mean, we'll listen to what the public has to say about it, but there's an ownership there that I think we felt that we had a very interactive experience in putting this together. And what's reflected here is not just what the officers came to us with, but how we digested it and changes that we put in it as well. So it's been a very robust process, and I think if you add to that what the public will put in, I think this is an excellent process and policy that we've come up with, and I really look forward to hearing what the public have to say about it.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? I'll therefore will put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And item 6 is the draft rates remission policy. So I'll pass across to Gary again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, although the latest version of the rates remission policy was adopted in August, the Revenue and Financing Policy Review has triggered another review of this one. Today we're seeking council approval on the proposed amendments and approval to begin the consultation process. The rates remission policy allows council to discount rates or penalties in limited circumstances. So the general theme of the proposed amendments is to harmonise the remission policy with the revenue and financing policy and proposed rating policy. So there's some clean-up and clarification and a remission for residents that reduce their household rubbish. So consultation on this policy would be included as part of the wider revenue and financing policy review. So are there any questions?
Councillor Brown.
Just curious around the consultation/communication with the community on all of these. When is that to start? Because I'm aware that this is all now public.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor. So we do have a schedule that's been included within these. So we are, if approved for and proceeding with this, we need to come back to council on the 8th of October with a statement of proposal plus a more detailed consultation plan around that. So it's something we have already started working on, but community consultation, we've got indicative dates at the moment between the 12th of October and the 11th of November. Although it's looking more like the 15th now. And we understand that given how impactful all this is, that we do need to have quite a thorough consultation process, and so that's something that we'll be considering as part of the overall plan.
Supplementary? Yeah. So just checking with that then, because I don't know whether media is going to pick up on this or anything, but so that's almost a month from now, and this information's already public. Is there going to be some sort of communication like now with the public to say, hey, this is what we're proposing, but consultation's coming? Or
Through you, Madam Mayor. At this point, no, not yet, because that will be part of the consultation plan. And so with that would be looking at advertisements within the media, public meetings, that sort of thing. So we still have to set all that up. So rather than go out and say, hey, this is available, take a look at it now, we want to be fully prepared to be able to go out with the proposal, because we do understand that some of this information, as was mentioned before, is quite dry. So part of the purpose of the statement of proposal is to lay it all out in easy to digest terms and in a way that people will be able to pick up and make an informed decision on. And in its present form, they may not necessarily be able to do that.
And further to that, we would certainly respond in a proactive manner to any direct inquiries that we received in the interim and explain what the process would be in a more formal sense as we move into the consultation phase. And the consultation will also include hearings, I'm sure. I'm sure we will have people that are wanting to come and talk to us about this.
Absolutely. On that front, at the moment we've set aside, we're proposing 3 weeks, depending on, we expect there to be quite a bit of community feedback. So that's why we're trying to make it as open as possible and have such a long time frame with this, but we're still in the process of developing that because we haven't even approved these policy amendments yet.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Just with regards to the current environment that dominates a lot of what we do this year, will any changes in our alert statuses impact on this, and do we have an alternative around engagement should we step up a level, or should those levels change to the detriment?
Through you, Madam Mayor. That's a really good question. It is something we're considering. And one thing we've found that with the step up in these levels is that tools such as Facebook and other mediums such as that can work effectively, and so we will consider that as a plan B if required, and so we will certainly be factoring that into the plan.
But supplementary. But outside of that, assuming the sun is warm and the sky is clear, we're anticipating to meet the current deadlines, and there's no risk around any changes in level around if we have to move those dates and the impacts on the LTP and consequent work?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely not. All it would mean is that for our face-to-face meetings, they would go online, but we'd still be able to manage it and have them at the same time. But we value face-to-face contact as it's a more rich way of communicating with people and engaging with the community.
Councillor Bogue.
Just a comment through you, Madam Mayor, in response to Councillor Brown's concern about the timeframe. This is going to be double debated on the 8th of October. So at the moment, this is the draft and we're approving it to go to Council on the 8th of October. So the consultation can't start until after then. I just wanted to clarify that.
Just through the Mayor as well, the next phase going to Council is actually the consultation document. So today we need the agreement from Council for the underlying information so we can prepare the consultation document to take it to that next phase. So, we need to make sure that if there's anything else outstanding on the table that we are aware of those today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? So the officer's recommendation we have before us is A, that council approve the inclusion of a remission for farmland under 5 hectares. B, approve the inclusion of a remission of refuse collection and/or curbside recycling targeted rates. C, approve the inclusion of a remission for residential properties used solely as a single residence. D, approve the removal of remission for land subject to special preservation conditions. E, approve the removal of remission of uniform annual general charges and targeted rates of a fixed amount on rating units owned by the same owner. F, approve other minor changes detailed in this report. G, note proposed amendments to rating differentials and definitions within the draft revenue and financing policy. H, note proposed reintroduction and amendments to the rating policy. And I, approve council officers consulting on the rates remission policy in conjunction with the revenue and financing policy. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tapani and Councillor Bogue. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Tapani?
No, everything's been said. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bogue? No. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? I will put that then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. And the final agenda item as a part of the revenue and financing policy being the draft rates postponement policy.
Thank you. Okay, so like the rates remission policy, the rates postponement policy was reviewed and adopted in August. The Revenue and Financing Policy Review has triggered another review of this policy. So we are seeking council approval on the proposed amendments and approval to begin the consultation process. The rates postponement policy allows council to delay the receipt of rates in certain circumstances. So today we're proposing the removal of postponement for farmland. So amendments proposed to the general rates differential within the rating policy recognises genuine farmland and rates at a discount to other rating differentials. Remissions are also proposed for rural properties, a rural property that does not meet the differential requirements. So as with the other policies presented today, if approved, the rates postponement consultation process would be wrapped within the wider revenue and financing policy consultation plan. Fairly short with this one.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so the officer's recommendation before us is A, that council approve the proposed amendments to the rates postponement policy to remove postponement for farmland. B, note proposed amendments to rating differentials within the draft revenue and financing policy. C, note proposed reintroduction and amendments to the rating policy. And D, approve council officers consulting on the rates postponement policy in conjunction with the revenue and financing policy. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Taylor. Did either of you wish to speak to the motion?
Just thank you all for your work. Good stuff, Gary. Dean?
Open up for anyone else in case you have a burning desire to speak to the last of the suite of papers. Okay. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Gary and Caroline.
Thank you.
Moving to our final agenda item for the day, being the Sports Grounds Charges Relief Package. And I invite Brian up to speak to the paper, please.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
So, this paper...
Sorry.
Oh.
Conflict?
Ah, right. Thank you. Sorry, Brian.
So this item seeks approval from council for the remission of sports grounds charges and charges relating to the Rodney Green Centennial Events Centre for the 2020 winter sports season and the 2021 summer sports season. The proposed recommendation sets out suggested criteria and also delegation. These remissions would align us with Hastings District Council, and they follow on from our rent and rates relief package, which was approved as a result of COVID-19. At the time, unbeknown to us, Hastings had agreed to the remission of sports grounds charges, and we now face a situation where regional sports groups are getting their charges remitted from Hastings and not from us, so it put us in a slightly difficult position. So happy to answer any questions there.
And just to add to that as well, so the way that we're proposing funding this particular initiative is to use unspent funds from our original consultation with the community, which was around our leases. So to date we've had less required from the total fund, and this gives us the ability to meet our obligations under existing budgets.
Thank you. Open up for questions. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Just a question around the estimated costs that you've put to this item. Does that is that an estimate of lost revenue or refunds that will need to be provided, or how is that being calculated?
In effect, it'll be a combination of both. There would have been some invoicing already carried out for the winter sports period, although the seasonal winter sports charges haven't been invoiced yet. And obviously the summer sports ground charges haven't been invoiced yet. So there could be a combination of some refunds for the winter period.
Thank you.
So further to that question, is the intent for this to be a blanket relief package, or it will be on an application basis?
No, the intention is a blanket remission of the sports grounds charges.
Thank you. Councillor Tupney.
Supplementary, is there and I apologise if it's in your paper, but is there a time frame, or I'm just around the application?
Well, it relates to the 2020 winter sports period, the use of our sports grounds, and then the 2021 summer period, which goes through till April, I think, 2021. So it's purely for a 12-month sports ground period, sporting period.
Good point.
And so that would typically be invoiced on a seasonal basis, and essentially we're saying that those charges will be waived for those 2 seasons.
Supplementary?
Mhm.
So by extension, Brian, does that mean that the costs indicated in this report are unique to what's written in this report, and once this is made available, that it is highly likely we will see others avail themselves of this service?
Just through the Mayor, so this is in relation to all sports. So it's not based on hardship, as we've previously required some of the requests to come through. This is a blanket across all of them, so we won't be charging fees and charges for that particular season. And, to be consistent across all codes, we've approached it and recommending to council on that basis.
Thank you.
And I note in the report that the remission is to be given to non-professional, not-for-profit sports organisations only.
Sorry, that's the good clarification, thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
Just another question through you, Madam Mayor. For example, for the Rodney Green Centennial Event Centre, does this mean that users that fit the criteria will not be charged at all?
That's correct.
During
that period. Yeah.
And for, again, just for clarification, for sports-related activity only, not for any other activity of the hall hire?
Then no further questions. Councillor Taylor.
I'd just like to flesh out the professional one. That, say for instance, the last 2, or this weekend, Hawke's Bay Rugby is prevented from having a crowd through COVID-19. Are they entitled to any relief for that?
No, that
or
wasn't.
Or is McLean Park excluded?
Yeah, McLean Park's excluded, except it could be considered on a case-by-case basis. So I would say that would be excluded, that Magpies game. It's also worth noting, currently we don't charge schoolboy sport, not schoolboy, school-age sport from intermediate down, so it's only high school and above, and we don't charge for practices on our grounds.
Councillor Simpson? And then Councillor Brown.
Just going to clarify a point on the ticketing for Main Park this weekend. Season ticket holders and members for the Magpies, their tickets are valid, and they will be issued new tickets between now and the game, and they will be able to attend, but under strict instructions as to how they can gather and assemble. So I just sort of wanted to clarify that, but there will be no general admission sales.
Thank you for that, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Brown?
I'm just interested in the other groups other than sports. You said they would still be charged. What sort of other activities are likely to be charged?
For example, the home and garden shows.
Okay.
And other users like that of the...
so more commercial rather than community groups?
That would be correct.
Yeah. And just so... No, don't worry.
If there's no further questions, I will read out the rather long officer's recommendation, perhaps try and paraphrase it a little bit. But yes, that we're here to resolve to approve the remission of sports ground charges and Rodney Green Centennial Event Centre hire charges for the winter and summer sports period. Approve that these be funded from any unused portion of the Rental Relief Fund and Rates Relief Fund. To approve general guidance criteria for admission being that it is non-professional, not-for-profit sports or organisations only, and that there is an expectation that this will be flow back to clubs and accountability for this may be required at council's discretion, that it applies to seasonal hire for open grounds and the Rodney Green Centennial Event Centre, one-off open ground sports games in general excluded, however remissions may be considered on a case-by-case basis. McLean Park is to be excluded, however may be considered on a case-by-case basis, and representative games and tournaments are excluded. And we're approving that delegation be given to the Director of Corporate Services and Council's Team Leader of Parks, Reserves, Sports Grounds to approve remissions, and note that this relief is an extension to the rates and rental relief approved by Council on the 30th of April this year in response to the financial effects and hardship caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Do I have a mover and seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor McGrath, seconded by Councillor Mawson. Did you wish to speak to this, Councillor McGrath?
Briefly.
This is good timing. A lot of clubs have struggled with COVID throughout the year, so I think this is a good opportunity that they can get their feet back where they need to be.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson, nothing to add. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Bogue.
Just before I vote on this, because I do support it, there was one question that I would like to ask. With the Rodney Green Arena charges, will this waiving charges apply to like the seniors group who actually moved out of there because Sport Hawke's Bay decided that the increased charges were beyond their means? Will they be able to take up this opportunity?
Are they a sport group? Seniors, you say seniors?
Yes, they're a seniors exercise group. Do you know
It's
what they're
run
called?
through Sport Hawke's Bay though, so
Yeah.
Sport Hawke's Bay are the people that would have been paying the lease, which would be excluded from, that would be my interpretation, as a commercial, like a sports NZ funded. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. So just to speak again, same along the lines as Councillor McGrath, it'll be a year to 2 years while our communities and our sports clubs continue to bear the brunt of COVID. So this is a fantastic initiative, and I look forward to seeing how it might benefit at a club level. But I also would be interested in hearing back from you at some stage, if not today, around Clause 3 of the officer's recommendations, where it says that the expectation of this will flow back to the clubs. And it's with the accountability side of it that I'd love to get some more information from at some point around how we as a team would be identifying that need and addressing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. We'll just note that as an action. Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I'd speak in favour, obviously, but I think one of the things that we have sort of just glossed over is that we are coming in line with what Hastings has done, and many of the sports are played across both cities, and so it actually is consistent that basketball that might be played over the river and also played on this side have the same playing field or court to play on. So I think it's a consistent regional approach, so I'm very appreciative of it.
Thank you. To have some additional information around how the accountability from clubs will be
captured.
Thank you, that's a good word to use. Yes. Oh, from. Yeah. Cool. Okay. There being no further people wishing to speak to the motion, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Got through that in quite good time, considering the volume of agenda items. Thank you, Brian and Adele, much appreciated. Thank you, everybody who participated today. I'll call the meeting to a close.
Kia ora. Thank you.